Welcome back to Season 2 of the Nobodies Project. This is a podcast where we sit down with creatives to talk about their art, ruts they've been in, upcoming projects, all things creative. This week we sit down with Zane Thomas. He is a comedian here in Portland, but he's also a rapper and a podcaster himself. In this episode we talk about how he got his start, including learning about how long his first set was. You'll see a nice little reaction in the video there, as well as some of his struggles and kind of where he's planning on taking his art. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode.
So this is season 2 of the Nobodies Project. We have Zane Thomas, musician, rapper, comedian, podcaster.
Yeah.
First off, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And the first question I always ask is, what do you do for money? And then what do you do for art?
That's such an unfair question. So for money, I'm a peer support specialist, peer support mentor. So basically what that just means is I'm like a therapist that never got a degree and used to do coke. So that's my job. So that's been pretty dope. But yeah, that's how I make my money. And then for art, I make music, produce music. I rap. I do comedy, and then I do the podcast, and all those take my money that I make from my job.
And one day, hopefully he'll start paying you back a bit.
One of these days.
Yeah. But the main thing, so I saw you at Telltale through Jasmine, who was on our first season, and it was, I forget what show it was exactly, but it was you performed, I don't think it was a freestyle, but it was a rap that was very emotional.
Yeah.
And it really struck a chord with me, and it was really great. How, with the rapping is, how's like getting to that emotional part? Because rapping obviously has this,
there's like a lot of surface level rap that kind of happens.
Yeah. Is it just an experience thing, or?
Yeah, a lot for me. A lot of the time, it is just having an experience and then trying to figure out how to communicate it. I think recently somebody had kind of verbalized it to me, is that like a lot of my music is something that like it comes from a point of pain, and because like I'm in this pain, I'll isolate, and during that isolation, I have to create like an art piece that is representative and communicative of what I'm feeling, and that's what allows me to reemerge.
Yeah. And then talking about with that, is that similar with how you do your comedy as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all in pain. It's all in pain. It's all in experiences. it's living and then figuring out how to translate that on stage or, wherever really is the most effective place. Sometimes I always say there's certain things I don't want to rap about. There's certain things I don't want to make funny. And, each time I just kind of figure out, where does this go?
Yeah, it's fun. With those two kind of pieces being together, do you feel there's a connection between like comedy and rapping? You said some things you don't want to make funny, some you don't want to rap about.
Yeah.
Is there ever been a time where you're like, oh, I don't want to rap about that, but it would be a funny joke?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely, I would say like the more painful stuff I try to put into music, but the stuff that's painful but like goofy, once I realize the irony in it, that's when I'm like, okay, I can fit this into a joke somewhere.
Yeah, I know, because some of your jokes that I've seen they're dark, but you can tell they come from a point of like honesty, where like it didn't start like you weren't like, oh, that's funny. It was, oh, this is something that's happening, but how can I like positively spin it? Exactly.
Yeah, I would say oftentimes that it starts from like a dark place of like, this is something that's just painful, and then through maybe workshopping it with my friends or workshopping it with just the people around me, it's like, oh, okay, I guess there is something funny to this. There is something that relatable about this.
Yeah. And have you always been a performer, in the sense of like when you were younger, were you like, oh, I'll try to be like fun? Like, because I was talking to Lee, and he talked about how he's like, yeah, I used to go up and try to be super positive and big energy. And if you know Lee at all, that's not his vibe.
Oh yeah.
Did it take like experience, age to like get to that point of like sharing yourself on stage?
Yeah, I think for a really long time, I always wanted to share myself on stage, but I was more nervous about how I would be received.
Yeah.
Because I grew up as a mixed race kid, so like not fitting in was something that I was almost constantly feeling. Mm-hmm. So I realized that like through humor, that was the thing that made me relatable. That was the thing that made me liked. So I started using that as a way of connecting. And then once I figured out that like the thing that I was really seeking was connection, that's when I started performing, because I realized I could connect through music, I could connect through jokes, I could connect through podcasting.
Yeah, I love that idea of always looking to connect, because
Yes.
I think that at least when you're younger, at least for me, it was more like, oh, I want to be known for this, or I want to be doing that. And especially with this project, it's all about, it's very quickly made apparent. It's like, oh, the community that you build around just talking to people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that realizing that everybody has a story is the thing that allows us to really, get to know people and find out that we have more in common than we might think initially.
Yeah. Just that idea of like, there's like a moment, at least for like most kids, where you realize like, oh, everything that's happened to me, all this stuff that's happening, each person you look at has a story as well, like that.
Yes.
And being able to explore that, and kind of like with this podcasting, with some of your the smoke break and stuff like that, it's highlighting people's experiences.
Yes.
And actually asking people about it, because like we were talking about before we were on mic, not a lot of people, everybody's kind of trying to tell their own story.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to ask people for those stories.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you brought that up, just because something that I always say is that questions are the answer. Like the only way you can really get to know anybody is by asking the right questions. Everybody has a story to tell, but they may not have been able to tell that story because they haven't been asked the right question in order to tell that story.
Yeah, I love that. Going into the smoke break, can you just take me through like how it came about? Because you've done over
We're at 81 episodes.
Yeah,
we're at 81 episodes as of currently. So the smoke break, it basically just kind of started off with like me talking to my mom all the time, and she was somebody who I would always want to make laugh, just because she struggled with mental illness. And it was me basically talking about like maybe the difficulties I had that day, but finding a funny way to talk about them and finding a way to relate. And so back in 2020, when Shady Pines started up their radio stations. They started up their radio station. They were just like, hey, we like you. We want to see what you can do. Here's a show. And I was like, all right, well, I've always wanted to do a show called The Smoke Break, because I think that the best conversations are when you're standing outside and you're like, we're both strangers, but if I ask the right question, we could be friends.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just progressed like that. It's been a whole cast of my friends, a whole cast of people who I look up to and I think are extremely talented. And it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how you find your guests. Is there a criteria? Like we do a similar thing where it's like the first criteria for us is like, do we legitimately like the art? And then after that, it's, does this person like, would they be an active part of a community? Would they like want to do all that stuff? Where's your criteria for having that on the smoke? Because it is a mental health podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like one of the most important things to me is that they can be able to discuss how they feel openly. I think that that's incredibly important, but I think even the people who are more reserved, getting to the bottom of why they're reserved is the thing that allows them to be more open later. So I would say, I like talented people. I love comedians. So there's a comedian on there almost every single week, but I think musicians also have a lot of stories to tell. So we started doing where we've divvied it up into the first half is a comedian or a mental health expert / advocate. And then the last half is a musician who, shares their music to kind of like bring up the energy, but also, tells their story of like, hey, like what kind of feelings do you have to be feeling in order to write this music? It's a question similar to the one you asked me.
Having musicians and comedians makes a lot of sense, just because at least good musicians and good comedians.
There's a lot of musicians and a lot of comedians.
To be good at it, you have to kind of just be yourself, because the mimicking of other people, well, when you're starting is usually how you get into it, the love of it, but it's really being yourself. So I think that makes complete sense for a show like that, for the smoke break and stuff. Do you have a like dream guest?
A dream guest?
Yeah.
So I would say, I would say, if we had Macklemore on there, because like he was one of the people who like he made a song about addiction like a couple years back that like it struck every chord in me, and was one of the people who made me really start digging deeper with hip hop. And so if I ever had him on the podcast, that would be. I'd be like, I think we did it. We can stop now. We're done.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is do you have like a goal?
A goal number?
Like a maybe episode number, or just like, do you want to reach a point where it's like, oh, I've interviewed all the people I kind of like. Obviously, it could be. It's endless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with mental health topics, I think that there's a lot to talk about. So, one of the things that I heard an artist say was like, I'm going to do it till it ain't fun and the words don't come, and then I'm going to find another hobby. And I think that about all the things that I do.
I was going to say, once you're done with podcasting, you just go right into comedian.
Yeah, exactly. And once I run out of words and it's not fun, then I'll go to rapping. And once it's not fun and I run out of words, I'll probably just chill. I think I've earned it at some point.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what was I going to say? Something about Jeez, I just blinked there. Good. With that, what's like? I assume you get in big creative ruts, as we all do.
Yes.
Do you have like a moment of like, this was the worst rut I've been in, and how do you get out of those ruts?
I think it's the new realization that I had about making sure that I am making the thing that I need to create, so that way I can get out of the rut. Is like the rut is created by me not being able to create, so it's basically just kind of creating garbage, for lack of a better word, until I can create the gold that's going to get me out of the rut. Yeah. I think that a lot of times we focus on like perfection and being like, oh, I want to make sure that it sounds like this and that it, but if we get too wrapped up in that, then we're not creating just for the sake of creating.
Yeah. I think I was listening to Dan Harmon, who said that you just need to, in reference to writing, you just need to make a whole bunch of garbage and then edit it and make it better and better until you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Because the seek of perfection is, everybody wants to be a perfectionist, or not wants to be, but everybody kind of is a perfectionist in their own way, especially if you're making art. But just having that ability to put out garbage, that was a really big thing, especially for me, was like, I'm just going to put out stuff because at least I'm doing stuff. I'm putting stuff out, and I'm going to naturally just get better and better.
Exactly. Yeah. I actually have a song recently that like I've been super excited about, and I showed it to. I actually debuted it last night, and it did not get the reception that I wanted. But the point is that I need to just release it so that way I can go on to the next thing. Like I think I had read something that was just like, completing the next thing or completing the last thing is what gets us on to the next thing, and it's like. Yeah. Sometimes when we're so wrapped up in like, it needs to sound like this, it needs to look like this, it needs to, then you just never end up releasing anything. Like I actually ended up recording a really quick podcast for a friend who was like, I want to do a podcast. I was like, oh, that's cool. So we made a beat, made an intro song, and then we just went to the studio and just recorded it. And I was just like, if you never use this, that's totally fine, but you at least started.
Yeah, you at least help make something. Something that I always like doing is like a lot of my friend group, and we had like this like artist accountability group that we all kept each other in check. But whenever anybody would be like, oh, I think I want to do a podcast, or I think I want to like do like a film or something, or a short film or something, I'm like the first person to be like, yeah, let's do it right now. Like let's get going and let's start scheduling it. Yeah. Because it's so great. Like you get that dopamine hit when you talk about something, and you're like, I'm gonna do this. Even if you don't do it, your brain still it gives you that little bit of dopamine. And I think actually going forward and doing it instead of just trying to get that dopamine hit. Yeah,
is just like, I've got this really cool idea. Yeah. It's like, and it's going to remain an idea until you do something with it.
Yeah. Somebody told me, I think it was, don't tell people you're reading a book. Tell people after you're done reading it. Yeah. And that's kind of in that, like, do it before you're like telling everybody about it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely, that's something that I appreciate about artists, is that like when they just show up with a product, like it's not like, okay, there's new stuff coming. It's like, dude, that's I don't want to hear that you have stuff coming. I want to hear that you have something out. It's like,
and then we can talk about that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of talking about this hypothetical.
Exactly, about like, it's going to be so awesome and it's I just want to see the thing. I want to make the thing. I want to put the thing out there because, you know, my idea of it and people's idea of my idea of it can be totally different, you know? So being able to put something in front of people, I think counts for a lot.
Oh yeah, it's huge. So you talked about not getting the reception you wanted on that song.
Yes.
Has there ever been a project that you were, maybe this is the one that you were absolutely stoked on, thought it was going to do great, and then it just
This is that one. This is that one. This is that one. I was like, this is my magnum opus. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I was like, this is going to be the, like, because I made a song a couple years back called "Everything Fell in Place," which is like one of my favorite songs. One of my favorite songs. Super emotional. Love that song to death, and I never really have made something that like I felt like was representative of emotions, was representative of how I was feeling. And I had written a song basically about bipolar and how when you get angry, and it's more about anger, I guess. It's more about like when you get angry, you can say and do things that you wouldn't normally do that are outside of your character. And it's like being able to put that into words and put that into a song, it wasn't something I was able to do, especially because it was kind of born out of a fight with a friend. So after I like created the song, I was like super excited about it. Like I got like a female vocalist on it named Mickey XO. She did a really good job. And I'm just like, this is going to be the track. Everybody's MTV. Should I call them or should I wait till they call me? And then like I did it last night. And obviously it was my first time performing it on stage. So I can't really count that reception of it, but and I did mess up a lot. But, you know, I think that, you know, having an expectation of how it should go is the thing that kind of takes me out of like appreciating the people who appreciated it, you know, because they might have appreciated it of the way that it went regardless instead of the way that I thought it should have went.
Right. Have you ever, maybe with comedy or music or anything, performed and you hated the performance?
Oh yeah.
And but the reception was really good.
Yeah, definitely.
And how do you? Because you kind of talked about that, like it's the people you care about that, you know, those opinions maybe matter a little bit more.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? Like, well, that worked even though I didn't like it.
Yeah, that one's definitely the hardest. That actually is kind of what spawned a break that I had taken recently. Was that I was doing, you know, because I'm work in the recovery community, I work in the harm reduction community, and I'd gotten a gig that was like a recovery event. You know, it was Hands Across the Bridge over in Vancouver, super cool event. I was basically where I wanted to be. I got to do what I wanted to do. They're like, you can do music, you can do comedy, you can do everything you've ever wanted. This is exactly what you're getting paid for the event. Like everything was awesome, and I was miserable.
Interesting.
And it was such a hard thing for me to understand that it was like my emotions are the thing that are going to determine whether or not I enjoy this. You know, like it doesn't matter, because I always thought that once I got to a certain point, then I would be happy. And it's like, no, I have to be happy and then get to a certain point.
Yeah. I think that's again, like when you're younger, you think like, oh, once I get here and I have a good job and I have a house, which in this day and age is impossible. But,
If those are my qualifiers, I am in trouble.
Me as well. You always think it's like there's a certain place you're going to get to, but every time you do get to that place, it's even if you are happier there. If I think for most people, most artists, it's well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
What was your, did you have, besides that show, did you have like I'm doing music and comedy and all that stuff. Did you have a milestone you wanted to hit?
I think the Recovery Summit last year was like probably the biggest recovery audience that I had performed in front of. And that was a really cool event just because like I felt like I was talking to the people I wanted to talk about and talking to the people I wanted to talk to about the thing I wanted to talk about. And it was very like that moment was very fulfilling. So I think with the things that I do, it's just reaching the people that I want to reach. So that's my milestone is basically feeling like I've created enough of a platform that the people who are seeking help, who are seeking somebody who they can relate to, who are seeking somebody to communicate with, I want to have a big enough platform that I can reach, you know, as many of those people as I can. Not all those people, but as many as I can.
Talking about the recovery space and everything like that, doing comedy, is it the fact that shared experiences so that you can joke about it? Because, for example, since I'm not in that space, I feel like because I don't know the experiences, I don't have that actual background.
Right.
Joking about that for me would seem tasteless. So, like, how do you is it something where you're just comfortable with it because, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been clean from meth for 10 years, clean from alcohol for almost 2.5. And yeah. So, but I mean, those are things that, like, if you're currently drinking, people are like, oh, he's judging me. It's like, dude, I don't care. I was there. Do you realize like how much I literally don't care that you do that? I'm just saying that I don't do that. Right. And the same thing with like meth, where some people are like, I've never done that. I can't believe you're just telling people that. And I'm just like, I don't do it anymore. If I was doing it still, I would not tell you about it. So let's take this as like a sign of good.
Right. With that, was there a point like joking about it, talking about it more openly? For me, like, I had like big bouts of anxiety, and as soon as I started talking about it, it's like, oh, everybody's like, oh yeah, no, I relate. It's finding that relation, that connection. Yes. How was bringing that to a stage though?
The thing is that if everybody laughs and relates, it is the most healing thing.
Really? Yeah.
But when they don't,
bombing is bad.
Yeah, bombing is bad.
Sharing who you are as a human being in bombing, it's like, you don't like me for me.
Whole different experience. That's literally what it feels like. But I feel like that's almost the importance of it, is that like, I would rather be vulnerable and share something that like maybe not everyone can relate to, but one person walks up to me and is like, yo, I needed that. Yeah. Then talk about something that everyone relates to and everyone's like, I could have heard that from that guy.
Yeah. One of my favorite comedians, Rory Scovel, always talks about when he's on tour, he's like, there's some places I go to that 5 people, I get 5 people, but as soon as I find those 5 people in the crowd, I'm catering only to them.
Exactly.
Because you're trying to find those connections.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the rapping that you've done, I saw at Telltale. How is it? Because when everybody's a kid and they think, rock star, rapper, whatever you want to be, you're thinking like, oh, a big crowd and all this thing. How is it performing? Because as you're coming up, comedy is the same way. Performing for like 15 to 20 people with like high energy rap and stuff. Is that just like a mental,
that is my favorite thing, honestly. That it really is, because it's like my favorite performers is actually a comedian. His name's Simon Gibson. Love that dude.
He's the funniest.
He is the funniest.
He's from Portland, right?
Yeah. Well, he makes trips here. I don't want to say that he's from Portland, but I would not be surprised because he's just such a goofy person. But he gives the same amount of energy to 5 people as he would 5 million people. And that is something that I've always honored, because there are people, and even myself at times, who have gone to a show, there's been 5 people, and I'm like, this isn't the 50 people I performed for last night. I'm going to phone it in. Yeah. Or I've seen other artists do that. And it's disrespectful to those 5 people that showed up. Yeah.
Because they actually came.
Exactly.
It should be disrespectful for the people that didn't come.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that being able to make the separation of like, okay, like if I want to be able to do this to the best of my ability, I need to make sure that I'm bringing it every single time.
Yeah, and even to that point of like, there's 5 people there, like those could be 5 new fans, and now you're directly in there.
Yeah,
which Simon Gibson also is the funniest. Like
absolutely. Hats off.
Yeah. Because I've only seen him with bigger crowds, so like the fact that he still does that in like a brewery
when he does it in a brewery with like, and it's like 5 comedians, and you're just like, everybody's just like, I'm just telling my jokes because I'm here and I signed up. Yeah. He's like, no, we're going to have fun. No, scratch that. I'm going to have fun. You can join me if you want to. And I'm like, that's who I need to be.
How is it kind of coming up in like open mics and everything like that? And how do you balance like what you want to perform in those things? Is it just what you're feeling that day, or?
Yeah. I think that I try to focus on what is most prevalent to me, like recently. Like if I'm dealing recently, I've been dealing with paranoia, right? And trying to figure out how to get that to translate on stage. Like it's something that I've been struggling with, and once I'm able to share that part and communicate that thing I'm trying to, then I'm in a place where I can really enjoy what I'm sharing.
Yeah, love that. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll come right back.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, dude. Yeah, we're back. I feel a need to say that sometimes, but even though we're just gonna get right back into talking.
Let's do it.
We're just talking about like vernacular or anything like that. your cadence of like how you do comedy, it seems very much like you. And it probably took some time to get there. I've listened to a lot of comedy podcasts where they talk about how your first 5 to sometimes 10 years, you're mimicking your inspirations.
Yes.
You're being you as if, like for me, it'd be like, oh, I'm trying to be my version of Rory Scovel.
Yeah.
Did you have that? Like, who inspired you? And have you found yourself almost mimicking certain people?
Yeah.
And that could probably go for comedy or music.
Yeah, definitely. I would say for comedy, Mitch Hedberg.
Yeah, I can
Mitch
see that.
Hedberg, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Stephen Wright is another one of just like, when I realized that you could make a short, condensed joke and like it's almost funnier because of how little it took to make it, I was like, how do I do that? And how did they do that?
Yeah.
And then for music, I would say Atmosphere. Atmosphere is somebody who I get compared to sometimes, and some people are like, "Oh, I'm sorry if that's offensive," and I'm like, "No, that's the person I listened to and really liked. Like that's a compliment." Well, musicians they get weird about comparisons where it's just like, my music isn't like theirs. It's an all new thing that I created because I am just a sole creator of. I'm like, no. We're all borrowing from everybody and trying to make our own thing from our 3 favorite people, you know?
Yeah. Stealing from one person's plagiarism, stealing from a whole bunch is art.
Exactly.
Yeah. With the rapping as well, did you go through a phase of like, oh, I want to sound like Tyler the Creator, like, you know, like doing a voice, or is it just your voice? Because at least when I've seen you perform, it didn't sound like you were putting on a voice. Maybe it was like you had a cadence.
Yeah. I definitely, like, my favorite compliment is when somebody's like, "This is you," you know, because like they almost don't know that it's me, but it's like it's not like, you know, I'm just like, "Hey man, how you know?" It's like that's not. I don't put on a voice, but I definitely, like, I would say like my cadence and just like my excitement to rap definitely shows through.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing I took away from your music is like the energy you bring from it. Is that just naturally how, or is that something, oh, that works, so I'm going to keep doing that? Or is it like, that's the shit I like, so that's the stuff I'm going to make? Yeah,
well, I notice a lot of people that I really look up to as far as like artists have like a lot of energy, and I'm just like, man, I wish I had that on stage. So I've definitely tried to bring more of a stage presence because like I know that the lyrics are good, but like if I'm not presenting them in a way that is, you know, digestible to a live audience, then it's like they're not even connecting with it. So sometimes it does take that energy of moving around or like getting up closer, or stepping off the stage, or, you know, doing stuff like that to really just make sure that the things that I'm communicating are being met with my body language.
Yeah, especially when you perform for Telltale. I think you went off stage a couple times, and you like the biggest thing I took away from it was like the energy I felt. Like you did a very good job of like making the whole room feel like kind of what we talked about earlier, like you were performing for 30,000 people.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
It was 40 people, 50 people in there, and it's just really cool to see somebody just really go for it like that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then you know, with some of the rapping stuff, how do you like? Where's your main focus at? In the sense of like, would you rather be known for comedy, known for podcasting, known for music?
I think I have multiple personalities because all of them are like yes.
All of it.
Yeah.
Like, call me. I want to be Donald Glover.
I would say maybe like I would want to be a rapper, then a comedian, then like a podcaster. It doesn't feel like that's what it is. But I'd even put like podcasting at the top, just because podcasting is where I get to be serious, but I also get to be funny.
Yeah.
And in music, I'm usually serious, and in comedy, I'm sometimes funny. You know, but like if I were to like take one that like if I were only to do one, it would probably be the podcast, just because it's most representative of all my parts.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And it's especially and that's why I think a lot of people have really connected with podcasts, is it kind of feels like you're hanging out with people.
Yes.
Because when you're recording podcasts, like, you know, we are right now, it does feel like, oh, I'm just hanging out with a friend.
Yeah. It's just the homies.
If it's going well.
Just the homies.
Yeah. But I did have a question about music as well. Have you had the moment where you're performing a song, maybe it's one of your more popular songs, and you see people like singing along to it?
Oh man, that happened at my album release.
How surreal is that? Can you just take me through the whole feelings around those?
Yeah, that was Especially because, like, I'm like a conscious rapper, so like most people don't relate to the things that I'm saying, you know, like, or not they don't relate to them. It's that they do relate to them, but it's like it's not really catchy, you know. It's not catchy in the sense of like everyone. I never expected anybody to sing along with something that I had.
But it seems more storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the point at which they connect is that's never up to me. But there's this song called "No Horse in This Race." And it's about a Portland comedian who had taken their own life. And the hook goes, a jockey ran a derby and he got last place. I said, you ran it all on foot. Don't you care what a waste? He replied with a smile on his face. Not really. I have no horse in this race. And everyone would come in on that last part, just like, I have no horse in this race. And I was just like, it gave me goosebumps like in the moment, because it was... Like I said, as a conscious rapper, I don't expect anybody to A, listen, and B, listen well enough to know the words. So like as I'm singing this song, and especially being a song as emotional as it is, for people to be like singing along to that, I was like, all right, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, that's it's surreal. I was talking to our first guest, Sam, and he'll run into some people wearing like his merch from his brewery.
Yeah.
And he it's just a very surreal, like, oh, like this is connecting to people. I don't like, it's one thing to connect with your mom or with like, you know, your friends who are always supportive and everything, but a complete stranger.
Yeah. Seeing somebody who you don't know, like Zoe, my current co-host, told me that she went down to an open mic in Salem and somebody was just like, you're the host from that podcast. I know you. I love that show. And she was just like, it was like a rock star moment for her. And I was just like, yeah, no, it's when you reach somebody in that way and they like reach out and you're like, it is one thing when it is your friends, you know, like, of course my friend has my merch. I gave him my merch, you know, but like when you run into somebody who's like literally wearing the thing that you created and you're like, wait, what, how did you get it though?
Yeah.
You know,
it's like, I didn't give you that.
Yeah.
You used your money for my thing?
My thing without knowing me personally. Cool.
But that's kind of where podcasts sit as well, where it's like, even though, like, for example, I listen to, like, I mentioned Rory Scovel and Daniel and Kirk, they do the Pen Pals podcast. Okay. And it feels like, you know, that's the beauty of podcasts is like, oh, I feel like I know them. I feel like I, like, am friends with them, even though I've never met them and, like, hung out with them at all. Right. But, like, that's kind of the beauty of podcasting. Yes. You mentioned it a couple times, being a conscious rapper. Mm-hmm. Can you take me through like what that, because to me, I don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah. So basically a conscious rapper for me, my personal definition is guns, money, and women are three things I never had. So I just rap about being sad. And that's what being a conscious rapper means to me. That's my essay. But it's basically it's rapping about the things that are maybe a little bit more real, you know, and not to say that those things aren't real to certain people, but those things weren't real to me. And so, you know, a lot of times it means taking like a political stance. Sometimes it means taking like a topical stance, you know, like mental health, for example. But for me, I've always thought that hip hop and rap were like a very cool genre, but they weren't always used in the ways that I felt they could have been used most effectively. So being able to put my story into that's I guess what makes it conscious for me.
I love that. Yeah, I think that especially some of the origins of hip hop, it's like it comes from a point of it's not braggadocious or whatever the fuck you say that word. It came from a place of telling stories. Mm-hmm. But can you take me through almost like the origins of like how you got to like doing rap and making music and comedy as well? Like where's Zane's origin story?
My origin story. So
you talked about it a little bit being mixed in.
Yeah. Well, I lived in a small town and I remember like I had asked somebody, I was just like, hey, is there any way that I could do stand-up here, right? I was just like...
How old are you?
Like 18, probably. Okay. So I just graduated high school. I was supposed to do stand-up for my senior project, but I didn't. Still graduated, I think. I don't know. I need to check on that. But I had asked them if I could do stand-up, and they're like, how long can you do? And I was like, well, I don't know. I've only ever seen stand-up. This is a small town, so I was like, I don't know, an hour? And so, I signed up for quite the adventure. And so they're just like, okay, yeah, that sounds fine. And I was like, yeah, it should be easy. And so I think actually what I even had told them was maybe like 30 minutes or like 15. Like I think I told them just like a really short time. I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I was also
Which
really...
even 15 is crazy.
If you've never done stand-up. Yeah.
It's people think you can just get up and talk. You can't.
You can't. And so I was heavily into drugs at the time, and I'd gotten busted around that same time. So I went to them, and they were supposed to have me perform on New Year's Day. And I went to them and I was like, hey, I got busted with meth. I'm not going to be able to, or I should still be able to do the show if you'll allow me. So once I get out, I'd love to do it. So I spent 30 days in jail. And after I got out, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I wrote my entire stand-up while I was in jail. And like, I didn't have a lot of paper, so I had to write super tiny with like this jail pen that like was made so it was bendy so you couldn't stab people with it. It was it's quite the origin story. I'm sure you imagined. So I'm like writing super tiny, and I'm like practicing it into my toothpaste tube, just like walking back and forth in my cell. And I was like, okay, I got like 15 minutes here, right?
Yeah.
So I show up to the thing. I'm like practicing. I have like 11 days of practice before I go and I do my set. And then on New Year's Day, I do my first stand-up comedy, and I did 45 minutes. 45 minutes because I could not do 45 minutes now. For the record.
Yeah.
For the record, I couldn't. It was because I had no limitation. There was nothing
That's a feature act.
Yeah, there was nothing in my brain that told me I couldn't do it. I had no frame of reference, so I just like the 15 minutes that I had prepared for, I didn't take into account that there wasn't laughter, that there wasn't remembering, that there wasn't, so it just ended up stretching, and I was like reading it super fast, and I'm like, okay, and I only had to look at my paper one time. For the record, I have to look at my phone at every open mic to this day. So,
how did the show go?
Went really well. I mean, I was surrounded by my friends and family, so okay, obviously it was probably gonna go pretty well. But after that, after I got busted, I ended up actually getting offered an opportunity to move to China, teach English, change my life.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that was actually the way that I thought, like, oh, well, this is how I can buy my equipment. Like, everything's cheaper in China. I can make a bunch of money. So I went over there, bought all my equipment, and then I ended up moving back to take care of my grandmother. And while I was helping take care of her, I was just like, hey, I'm going to go to my first open mic. Just started doing that. And
so then, you got to your first open mic. You're like, all right, cool. I can do like a half hour.
Yeah, exactly. I was very confident. Yeah. I was just like, 3 minutes? I don't know if I'll have enough time until I was bombing for 3 minutes. And it was the longest 3 minutes, and it wasn't all my friends and family. So it was much different. But yeah, I basically moved back and just kind of started pursuing it. And then after I had gotten to a point where I was comfortable, I was like, all right, well, I think it's time to move to Oregon. And Portland was always the plan. Even when I was in China, like everybody would be like, where are you going? Portland. Where are you going? Portland. Where are you going? Portland. So
what about Portland had the draw? Because you were a small town outside of Portland?
Yeah. Well, I was also always the weird kid. So a place like Portland seemed like where I might fit in.
Bunch of weird kids all hang out and doing their thing. Yeah.
So that was the plan. It kind of just worked out that I had a friend that lived up here. He's like, you can stay with me when you move back until you can get on your feet. And just offered me. I've been offered the opportunities to succeed in times that I should have failed, that have allowed me to make the most out of those failures. Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm lucky. Like when I say, like I'm grateful for what I have, I'm grateful to a team, I don't do this by myself.
No. Yeah. That's something that I think I was talking about yesterday, where you can tell somebody's a good leader or like they're making good stuff if they have a team around them, because there are some people, like I'm sure you've worked for bosses who are like, oh, I did this, not the team. And that ego and that almost arrogance of like, oh, I can do all that stuff. Yeah. You're lucky you're here.
Yeah. I'm doing you a favor by bringing you on and letting you put your name on. No. Yeah. I am good at the things that I do, and the things that I can't do, I know I need a team. And even the things that I think I'm good at, I could be better at if I were to take direction from the people around me.
Yeah. Or not even, direction, but just talk to people and get those experiences. Yeah, with everything you do, you obviously need a team, but we're talking a little bit about it. How do you deal with burnout? And
I don't. I collapse every single time, like a dying star. But I'm reborn as whatever happens in science.
Like a phoenix.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah. No, I would say that burnout is definitely something with all the things that I do. It's a common thing for me to experience, but it's also, for me, it's almost just like a proof that I put in the work. It's like if you're this tired, you must have done a lot of work. So I would say for me, burnout is it's something that's inevitable at certain points, but like I've found ways to kind of minimize it so that way it's not like a total shutdown. It's like this last time I took a 2-month break right after my birthday. Took a 2-month break. But during that time, I've been writing music, I've been writing comedy, and it's like I wasn't performing. I can't turn it off.
I was going to say, can you
I've tried.
Just really not do anything?
I've tried.
Just have a whole day of just watching TV. It's like, no, I'll do that. And that's what I'll say. But I did edit some photos.
Yeah.
And I did write some stuff and did a little organized. But I feel like I can never truly turn it off.
Nope. And I've tried to turn it off in the past. There was a 2-year period where I just didn't do anything, and I was just like, maybe I don't need this stuff. And it was through that time and coming back to it that I was like, I realized the importance of it in my life.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I had heard somebody say sometimes you have to go away to come back, and like that's that. I didn't really realize what I was missing until it was gone.
Yeah, and then additionally, like with a job and everything like that. I mean, unfortunately, we all have to make money and do it somehow. How do you find time to do all those things? Like, burnout's a thing, but how are you a hyper scheduler? Like,
yeah. I have a to-do list. I bought a to-do list app.
Physically writing
called Todoist. Oh. No. It's a cool app called Todoist, and it has like little markers of like, oh, you did this, and it like kind of just goes into a bank. And yeah, I'm very goal oriented, and if I don't make notes of all the things I have to do, they won't get done. And the only person like who suffers is me because I'm the one on my own schedule. I'm my boss and my bad employee. So that's frustrating.
That's funny. Going into even more of like how you do it as an artist, like how does all those things relate to like the imposter syndrome, the inevitable imposter syndrome? Unless you're like, imposter what?
Yeah, imposter who? No, I definitely have imposter syndrome. I would say finding who I am has helped me not focus on the people who I'm not, I guess, because I feel like imposter syndrome is like, oh, I'm not blank comedian. I'm not this person.
Here yet. I'm not doing these shows
yet.
Yeah,
exactly. But like being realistic about where I'm at, and if that's in the sense of like how far behind I am or how far ahead I am, just being realistic in the sense of like, you're doing better than you think. You're not doing as bad as you think, and you're probably not doing as good as you think.
Yeah, there's a balance there. But talking about stuff that you've done is always like going back and looking at old projects and everything like that, being reflective and seeing how much better I've gotten just looking at that has been massive.
Yeah.
The last question I'll ask you is like, at what point would you say, like, we talked about milestones and all that stuff, like, what's the big milestone you want to hit, or that you were like, oh, I've made it? Obviously, as we talked about it, where as soon as you get there, it'll be gone. But what's your current, like, this is the goal right now?
I would say the point that I would think that I would made it, like probably my next big milestone, is if I could get the smoke break onto like a radio station, but like we were allowed to cuss, but they just bleeped it out. That would be me being like, dude, we're reaching as many people as we can, and we get to be ourselves.
Yeah, like
that. I think reaching as many people as you can and being able to maintain who you are, that would be my milestone of I've made it.
Oh, I love that. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. This is super
thank you
fun.
for having me. I had a blast.
Is there anything that you want to plug? Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about it.
That's okay.
The live show of your podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, is there anything else you want to plug? Anything coming up that like people should look out for? Shows?
Yeah, I would just say keep an eye out for the podcast or the live podcast. It's just going to be the last Saturday of every month, starting this month. So just go ahead and keep an eye out for that, because that's gonna one of our first episodes is actually going to have Jasmine.
Great.
So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's super fun. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate you.